The Nobodies. It's a great show. Welcome back, everybody. This is the 4th episode of The Nobodies. Very exciting time.
Absolutely.
We've had a great time. I can't believe it's been 4 episodes already.
I know, and
they
seems
fly
like
by.
Brand new still.
Yes, yes. If you haven't checked it out, we have a new Facebook page, The Nobodies. Check it out. Go like it, follow it. Look at the, we have the past episodes up. 1 through 3 are already up there, and this one should be up very soon. We're excited to be here. We're excited to talk to our guest. Yeah. And as always, Edward Gold.
Howdy.
I'm Zach Huckabee, and our guest this evening, the esteemed... I've seen him on pictures in the post office before.
Pictures in the post office, huh?
Yeah, wanted, you know?
Wanted.
Oh. Yeah.
Lost.
Lost. The milk carton section.
Mr. Joe Manuel, thanks for being on the show,
I'm proud
buddy.
to be here.
Yeah.
Well, let's just do a background. I'll start off with a background. Where you came from, who you are, you know, just a brief bio.
I'm from Louisiana, Creole, Louisiana. It's right below Lake Charles.
Mm-hmm.
It's right down on the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, within 3 miles. So there's swamp. It's all swampland, and that's where I grew up until my dad moved us to Houston in 1974. I was 14 years old, and so Texas. I'm living back in Texas now. I spent 23 years in Nashville. Moved back to Texas 14 years ago. And it was because it was, I spent my teenage years here.
Yeah.
And that's a real important time in your life. And actually, I married my high school sweetheart. We went to school together in Houston back then. And
Me too. I married my high school sweetheart.
That's isn't that very nothing? Yeah, but I had about 30 years in between. We broke up because I went on the road. I was in a family band.
Okay. Mm.
And so we went on the road, and actually in the end of 75, I think it was. So Teresa and I mean, my girlfriend back then, my wife now, only had about a year and a half together. But boy, that year and a half made a big impression on my life. Mm-hmm. That stayed. And we got separated for, like I said, almost 30 years. But I never could forget her. She broke up with me because I was on the road all the time.
Yeah.
We stayed gone 7 months one time, and we stayed gone 11 months the next time. And so it was, I learned my first lesson about being a road musician. You lose your girl. So anyway.
Oh, hence all the songs that come out of it.
Yeah.
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 And it does help with emotions. I'm a musician by trade, and my dad being a musician and our teacher, Mom and Dad both, and they always taught us to put your heart in whether you're singing or whether you're playing, you put your heart in it. Mm-hmm. And falling in love and getting your heart broke helps that,
yeah.
Somehow. But anyway.
The guitar never breaks your heart. She's always there.
No, that's right. That's right. She understands everything.
Well, what's the guitar's name?
Well, I have Sophia that is my acoustic guitar that I play probably more than I played my electric. I play electric. Its name is T, for Teresa. But I equally like both.
Yeah.
Some electric players don't like playing acoustic. They think it's beneath them. I love playing acoustic because a guitar is a guitar, right?
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
And there's some things you can do with acoustic that you can't do on electric, and vice versa.
Vice versa, yeah.
So I like playing. The ideal thing is when I can play both.
Yeah. Right.
But those are few and far between.
Yeah, right.
Really.
So obviously Joe's a musician, and Joe's a very, very good musician.
He's okay.
Amen. I'm still learning too.
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, not that I've been around music a little bit, but Joe's probably one of the best I've ever seen. So,
thank you.
Can you tell us who you've all played for? Because you played for a lot of big names that people do know.
Well, originally, of course, with my family, we had a family band. That was my grounding because my dad played with Lefty Frizzell.
Oh, wow.
And so he knew what that life was about. and he actually quit for a long time until I started playing, and I was 10 years old when we started playing at Shakey's Pizza Parlor.
Okay.
And back then, playing more banjo than guitar, really.
Oh, cool.
Tenor banjo. And learning some swing-type songs.
Mm-hmm.
Swing is my passion. That's my favorite kind of
I love
music to play.
Yeah.
And so anyway, after that, my first job outside of the family was with Lynn Anderson. And she was a big star back in the
Yeah.
70s,
Sure.
60s, and 70s. And so at the end, and I was 19 years old when I got the job with her. And I was with her for, I was 18 years old, I'm sorry, with her for 6 months. But I wanted to go to Nashville. That was my dream, you know, ever since I was 11. My dad was a disc jockey,
Mm-hmm.
so he'd go to Nashville during, you know, that time of the year, disc jockey week they used to call it then. And they'd come back and just talk about Nashville, and you know, all the people that were playing the jam sessions, some of my
Sure.
heroes, and so I couldn't wait to get there. Well, I'm playing in this hotel staff band in the hotel for a little while I was playing with Lynn when we weren't on the road. She lived in Lake Charles at the time.
Oh, okay.
So I was living in Lake Charles, and I got the job with her. So anyway, everybody that came through and played at the Civic Center there would stay at this hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So one night, T.G. Shepherd came through, and after their show, they came in, and I was asked if I'd, you know, they were about to make a change, and I was asked if I'd, you know, like to go on the road with them, and that was my chance to go to Nashville.
Yeah, man.
So I didn't even, you know, I gave Lynn my notice, and I moved to Nashville, and that was in 1980. TG, and then after TG, I went to work with Jimmy C. Newman, who was a big friend of my dad's, and I lived right by him in Murfreesboro, Tennessee,
Yeah.
which is right out of Nashville.
Sure.
And my little brother was playing with Jimmy C., so I wanted to play with my little brother.
Mm-hmm.
He had started playing fiddle by then. He was a
Okay.
drummer before. And so I left TG and went to work with Jimmy C. for a little while. And then we stayed in town. After that job, we stayed in town and played at Twitty City. At the time, I was married to Conway's oldest daughter, Joni.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hold on 1 second. Conway Twitty's daughter?
yeah.
Yeah, Conway Twitty's
she was
son-in-law right here.
Get the heck out of here.
First, yeah. And we're still friends. Joni and I have a great friendship. We don't see each other,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, sure.
obviously, but anyway.
So can I hold on 1 second? Hold on 1 second. Conway Twitty. I mean, like those pipes, man. The quintessential country
Mm-hmm.
pipes. You know.
Rhythm and blues too.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that song I Talked to the Man in the Moon. I love that
Yeah.
song.
Yeah.
That is so. Yeah. Okay, I could go on. You want to go on? We don't have to talk about Conway Twitty, but he's
So we did that for a while, you know, and played at Twitty City, and then he also had the music for across the street was Music Village,
okay.
and there were shows there in that theater 6 nights a week. So we were playing Twitty City 7 days a week, and we were opening up all the shows
Mm-hmm.
at Music Village in the evenings, and we did that for a little while, for a couple of years, and then we started working in a couple of clubs, and we wound up at night. We were staying at Twitty City during the daytime. We did that for, I don't know, about 4 years, I guess. It was a pretty good steady job, and we were living there too. So it was pretty. It was a good time for me. That's when I really learned how to play acoustic guitar.
Sure.
Because we had a trio, Joni and I and my little brother,
Yeah.
and then we went to Opryland Hotel, and we played there for quite a few years. And Joni and I wound up getting a divorce, and Abe and I kept, my little brother and I kept the trio, and Merle Haggard comes in there one night, and he sits right down front, and he's sitting there like this, you know.
Oh my gosh.
His guitar player was a friend of mine, is a friend of mine, Clint Strong, and Clint brought him in there. Merle was in town, and so they sat right there at the first table, and we had our little trio, and after that night, we were invited to go back to Clint's house for a jam, a jam with Merle. So we wound up staying there till about 4 in the morning.
Sure.
And Merle had to do the Ralph Emery show the next day, so he invited us to go there. So we went over there. And we wound up working with Merle. We wound up recording with him first, actually. He flew me up there to do a couple albums.
Do you remember which albums were?
It was 1970s. There were 2 albums that he had on Curb Records.
Okay.
And he wasn't a big fan of Curb Records.
Sure.
He was there, but and he was going through a hard time in his life, actually. He was going through a divorce himself.
Yeah.
He had divorced Leona Williams, and financially it was really strapping on him.
Sure.
Because he just wanted to get it over with. So anyway, I was there during that time, and as I said, we stayed over there for 3 or 4 days. Had Larry London on drums, Lee Scalar on bass, Bobby Woods on piano, and here's this coon-ass, from Creole, Louisiana. And I was in awe because these guys were the cream of the crop. Yeah. Lee Scalar.
Oh yeah, man.
From L.A. He's one of the best bass players in the world.
Yeah.
And knows his way in the studio. He's recorded with a lot of people. Larry London, same thing, and Bobby Wood, same thing. And so anyway, that was my first gig with Hag. And I went back. He called me a few months later to go back and do some overdubs. And at the time, I was getting married again to my second wife. God, that sounds terrible. I've been married 3 times, but this time, I'm married to who I've always wanted to be married to.
Anyway, we're not going to dwell on that. You just keep going. Tell us a fun story.
That's a whole other story. But so I go back and I do these overdubs with Hag, and while I'm there, he asks me if me and my brother would like to open up his shows in Branson. He was going to be in Branson at Willie Nelson's theater. I mean, Abe and I at the time were trying to get our own record deal.
Yeah.
It's how we'd been there for quite a few years in Nashville, and we'd learned the ropes. And we had some support from people like Conway and, through the years. And so, but when Hag asked us if we wanted to come to work with him, well, Roy Nichols, who was his longtime guitar player, he's my favorite guitar player in the world.
I mean, the licks.
Yes. So to get a chance, now Roy was already out of the band. He had already retired, and Clint was there.
Okay.
And so we were hired just to open up their shows first for that year. It was 93. And then at the end of that year, he asked us if we'd like to join the Strangers, the band, and we said yeah. So that's what we did, and we'd open up his shows. We'd do a couple of 3 songs before he came out, which is horrible thing. When people are going over there to see Merle Haggard, you don't want to be the guy that's in between them, and that was, but it taught us so much, and watching Merle. Really taught me. He's a great band leader.
Yeah.
I say that like he's still here. He really is in a sense. His music and the stuff that he taught us, and he became a really good friend of ours as well. And I stayed there for a little while, and a friend of mine, Jason, he was married to Leanne Womack. Okay, so Leanne had just got a record deal. And so I get a phone call from Jason. He said, I know you're working with Hag, but, how would you like to, Leanne's just now getting started, how would you like to do that? And I thought, well, I've never done that before. Start with someone.
Yeah. And that's completely different from everything else that you've done, too, as far as stylistically.
The coolest thing that I did with her was in the very beginning, before she even got a band. We were doing what they call the radio tour.
Oh, yeah.
We were promoting her first record. And it was just she and I, and we did the West Coast. So you did 3 radio shows a day. And we did that for a couple of weeks, but it was a great experience.
Do you remember what song it was?
well, Never Again. Again was her first
Okay.
single, and then I'm the Fool,
Oh yeah.
In Love with a Fool. It was that album.
Okay.
So we were doing we'd do like 3 songs, and she'd do interviews, and it was live, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And first thing in the morning, you got to get, it's hard for a musician, usually, but, and it was fun. It was grueling, but it was a lot of fun. So I did that. I did the radio tour with her first, and I was still working with Hag. But then the opportunity came up. She wanted to put a band together and wanted me to help her put the band together. So I did. I asked Hag if I wanted his blessings on that, and so I did that. Let's see, Ricky Skaggs is in there somewhere too. Let's see.
I couldn't even play. If Ricky Skaggs told me to play one song in front of him, I wouldn't. I'd be like, no, I'm okay.
He was one of my heroes. I loved his music, and I loved his guitar player at the time was Ray Flack, and Ray had left the band, and so they asked me, and that was before Leanne, actually. That's how I met Leanne and Jason. That was her first husband.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Ricky Skaggs is like, a good Christian man too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's like a hard.
That
solid.
was the coolest thing about that, because every morning, you get in the bus and you leave, and you usually ride all night, and you get to the hotel the next morning, and the rooms aren't ready.
Yeah,
sure.
Your rooms aren't ready till the afternoon. Sometimes they try to put a hurry on it. But the cool thing was we'd get to hang out, and talk about Jesus for hours, in some restaurant somewhere. And I was with him for about 6 months, and then I went back to work with Hag, and then I left Hag again and went to work with Leanne.
So what was the difference between Ricky Skaggs and Merle Haggard as far as personalities-wise?
Oh, well, there's a big difference, only because the era that Hag grew up in, he was
outlaw.
old school.
Yeah.
His heroes were, Jimmy Rogers, of course, but Bob Wills, Lefty Frizzell. And so that old school mentality, Hag would get on the stage, and we never had a set list. There was no such thing as a set list.
Oh, cool.
So you never knew what he was going to do. He'd hit a chord, and a lot of times you'd know by whatever that chord was. And he didn't just play in G, C, and D. He played in F sharp and A flat and E flat and all these. So it was great.
One of my favorite records that he ever did was For the Last Time, that Bob Wills record.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Holy smokes, that's a great record.
Yeah.
That's my favorite Merle Haggard record. You ever heard that before?
I don't think so.
Oh, it's
I
great.
love Bob Wills, so I'm,
Yeah.
It's a tribute to the best damn fiddle player in the world.
Right.
That's
right.
the title of
Really?
the album. And I worked with George, and George said that's the album that got him interested in singing country music.
Oh, wow.
Was it really?
Because of that record. In George's earlier career, he did a lot of Bob Wills stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, he did
Did
No
it
Cap
really
Blues
good.
and
Right or Wrong and all
Right or
those.
Wrong, that's right. Yeah.
So anyway, and in Skaggs is he's a perfectionist. In the music world, he's known as Picky Ricky because he actually knows, like George, I've found out, Ricky knows what every instrument is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And he
So
expects
he's like
to
a
hear
composer
it.
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He studies his albums that close.
Sure.
Well, he's a producer in his albums, and
yeah.
George is that way too. And George is not the musician that Ricky is.
Right.
But man, he knows what everybody's supposed to be doing.
Right.
And I loved when I learned that.
Yeah.
It gave me more respect for George.
Yeah.
Well, before you get into who George is, because we didn't say the last name, this is pretty exciting. I'm going to take a break. We have a good news break.
A good news break.
We have a good news break, Joe.
All right.
We talk good news and good things that are happening around
Cool.
the world. This one's happening inside of my house. Okay? Good news.
Yes.
My wife is beautiful. And I'm
Yeah.
not just saying that. She is exquisite. She got picked to do a JCPenney commercial. And she shot the commercial, and the commercial dropped today.
Today.
Good
Very
news.
cool.
Very cool stuff. she is. We're excited about it. I just think we're not gonna. We probably won't pursue much after that. But it was just a lot of fun. And Clive got to be in the commercial, and I got to be in the commercial. But I wasn't very good looking, so they kept me out of the commercial. But they kept her in, which was awesome. So
Yeah, so maybe coming to a JCPenney commercial near you.
check it out, JCPenney. It's the JCPenney Challenge 2017 Holiday Challenge. So there you go.
I love
Little
that.
plug for JCPenney and my wife, Krista Huckabee.
That is good news.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Good news. Okay, so you said so we're just going through the ranks. You got T.G. Shepard. You've got Merle Haggard, of course. A few people have heard of him. Ricky Skaggs, Leanne Womack,
Lynn Anderson.
Lynn Anderson, and then you mentioned this George fella. Maybe not too many people have heard of him before, so you might tell.
Well, before that, there was Randy Travis.
Randy Travis.
Randy
I remember
Travis,
that. Yeah.
For 5 years. Leanne decided she wanted to take some time off, and she was a new mother, and it was real important to her, and we all respected that from her. The cool story, we were doing a Christmas tour, and she had the Duke Ellington Orchestra on the tour with us. So we got to jam with them, and some of them rode the bus with us, so that was like one of the highlights of my musical career, was to get, because I love swing music so much, and here's all these really cool guys. Some of them were new, and some of them, were older. It was all mixed, and they liked the idea that they had a couple of bunks. Because their bus was all chairs,
Like
seats.
charter type bus.
Yeah, I think Ray Charles did that too. With such a big band, so that was kind of cool. So at the end of the very last night of this Christmas tour, Leanne comes on the bus and she tells us, what her plans were, and so I get a phone call when I get back home from Irv Woolsey, who is George Strait's manager, and he said, Joe, I don't usually get into George's music stuff, but I just thought, he said, he needs a guitar player, and Irv used to come when I wasn't on the road. I was always playing, like on Broad Street there in Nashville with different bands, and I had my own band too, and just that's what musicians do to keep your chops up. Play with everybody, and it kind of keeps you on your toes. And with Irv and always would come, and so and we knew each other through Leanne Womack as well, because he was her manager too. So anyway, he asked me how I'd feel just to go on this one tour with him, and it's when George did Houston Astrodome for the last time. Okay. So it wound up being video, and now I'm a picker, right? Yeah. So I'm thinking dollars. That's how I make my money. Yeah. Well, he did videos from that. We did a live album from that. Oh yeah. And we did a live DVD. Oh yeah. From that. So boy, that was such a blessing. Yeah. To get to do that.
So just to catch everyone up, we're talking about George Strait.
Yeah.
Joe plays guitar for George Strait, acoustic rhythm guitar for George Strait, and currently,
yeah.
And so what year was this that you did the Houston gig?
That was 2002.
2002. So you've been with him for 15 years.
Yeah. Well. Okay. After that tour, we came back home. We played in Houston, and we played the Pyramid there in Memphis. I don't remember the other place we played. There were 3 actual, dates, and and when we got back home, they did ask me if I wanted to join the band, and at the same time, by the grace of God, Randy Travis's people called me and asked me if I'd be willing, and it was more work, so it meant more dollars for me. So I told George's crew that I really couldn't. I wanted to, but I really couldn't, and they understood. Yeah. At the time, this is the kind of guy George Strait is. Yeah. He's such a gentleman and a great guy. David Anthony was who I took his place. David Anthony physically couldn't do it anymore. He had some problems in his neck, and he's a great musician. George kept David Anthony on payroll.
Oh, cool.
On salary, and I understood that. So he couldn't afford to do that for me too.
Right.
And I understood that. So I went to work with Randy, and I stayed with Randy for 5 years. And that was the coolest thing too, because again, here's all these new things for old coon-ass here.
Yeah.
We get on a jet, and Randy hadn't had a hit in a few years at that time, and Three Wooden Crosses was recorded.
Oh my gosh.
So they have this plan, you know, and it's a great plan. It worked. We got on a Learjet, and for 3 weeks we were on this Learjet. We started. They picked us up in Nashville, and we flew to the West Coast, and we did Saddleback. You know, Rick Warren's
church.
Church. That was the first church that we did. We did Crystal Cathedral. We did these giant churches, and some smaller churches all the way back east. We wound up in Atlantic City, and met the rest of the band. At the time, Randy, it was just a smaller band that would play in the churches, and we were playing. It wasn't just on Sundays. And the cool thing was to get to know Randy first of all like that.
Yeah.
Because he would lead in prayer. I mean, they did interviews, and he gave his witness, and we were promoting this new album that wound up being a #1 record for him, and it revived his career for a little while, and then we met the band in Atlantic City at some casino.
Right. Ronnie Huckabee and I share the same last name, but it's spelled differently. And I saw him play here in Lampasas once, and I walked up to him and I said, "I think you're my dad." And he came back with the greatest response. He goes, "Where's your mama from?" It was a good icebreaker. He's not my dad though. Okay. So
I know your dad. I love your dad.
Oh my god. Anyway, well, that's awesome. So then George Strait, you signed on with George and been playing with George, and then kind of tell me that he retired. You're still playing with him from time to time, and
yes, he's doing right now. What he's doing really is 5 weekends a year.
Sure.
We've been in Vegas this is coming up on our 3rd year. This year we did 5 weekends. So we did one in February, we did one in April, we did one in July, did one in September. Now we're going to do one in a couple of weeks.
How much rehearsal has to go for only 5 weeks out of the year, or weekends out of the year?
Normally just 3. Like coming up, we're going to go in this. He rents his studio, and we just park there we'll be there Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then after rehearsal Wednesday, we'll get on the bus and head to Vegas. We get there Thursday, and then we'll start on Friday. And it's when we're there, it's work.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure.
And our day starts at noon, and it ends about midnight.
Yeah.
So I mean, we get time to take what we call our pawpaw naps after rehearsal. We got a couple hours after rehearsal.
This is what musicians look like 40 years down the road.
Yes. That's what's left of me. You were talking about royalties a while ago. I have a good Merle story.
Okay, I'm ready.
So a few years ago, George recorded Seashores of Old Mexico, and it was a single. And at the time, and this was in 2009, I believe. So Merle had called me. We had that kind of relationship. He's really the only one. I mean, Leanne and I had that kind of relationship too, but Merle would from time to time call my phone. I had his numbers and he had mine. And so anyway, he calls me one night. Oh, it was perfect timing too, because I was at my in-laws' house. And they're big fans of Merle Haggard's. Well, my phone was inside, and I was outside cooking. I was cooking a Cajun meal for everybody, the family. And my phone rings, and it's inside.
Yeah.
And they come from inside and say, "Hey, man, Merle's on your phone for you." So anyway, he asked me if I'd come to work with him that year. I hadn't been with him in a couple of years, and I said, "Well, man, I would love to, but I'm with George, and I've made a commitment to him." And he said, "Well, you know what? I'll work you around George." He said, "If you'll come, those weeks that George was still on tour back then, but
Yeah.
he wasn't doing but about 20 days a
Sure.
year, so it's still about, a little bit more than we're doing now. So Merle would fly me. I'd go out with George sometimes, and sometimes I'd fly out there with Hag, depending on, because when Merle went out, it was for 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And with George, it's the weekend. You leave
Yeah.
on Thursday, and it's kind of like they do in Nashville, too. But with Hag, that was the difference with him, too, because we'd go out for 2 or 3 weeks and play every night.
Yeah.
Boy, that's if you're going to be on the road, that's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
Days off on the road are miserable.
Oh, yeah, it's
'cause
boring.
you don't know what to do.
I
You'd
know.
rather be home with
Yeah.
your family, but with Hag, it was all. So what was happening is on Thursday night, I would fly back to George's tour, and I'd play with him Friday and Saturday. And then they'd take me to an airport, and I'd fly back with Hag and play the rest of the week, and then fly back with, going back and forth. And that was I turned 50 that year. And boy, I thought at the end of that year, I was like, I think I'm getting too old for this. Because I wasn't getting much sleep, but we sure got to pay a lot of bills off.
Sure, man.
It was a
Yeah.
great year. But anyway, my story I was wanting to tell you was Seashores of Old Mexico. Merle was so excited, and he said he called me on his bus, and we'd always visit, in the beginning. And he said, I called my publishing guy. He was a BMI guy, Merle was. So Merle wrote that song by himself, and it was a title of one of he and Willie's
Yeah.
albums together. But Merle wrote that song by himself. So
Oh my gosh.
the publisher gets 50%, Merle gets 50%.
Right.
So Merle calls the BMI guy and says, "What's a George Strait single worth?" "Oh, about $500,000.
Yeah.
Man, Merle built this beautiful studio that year. He's got $1 million studio up there.
Oh, that's
Now
so
it's
cool.
probably just sitting, but what a beautiful studio that is.
Yeah.
Merle
Man.
always recorded. We'd get back from being on the road 2 or 3 weeks, and he wouldn't let us go home because the band was hot.
Yeah.
We'd
Yeah.
been playing every night for 3 weeks, so we'd always record.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's stuff in the can that his family will be able to use for forever,
Oh, man.
probably.
How fun is that? Just to was it one of those things where you could just you could just jam? Was it just every night was kind of a jam session with
Yeah.
Merle? Oh my gosh.
Because you don't do anything like the
Yeah.
record.
Yeah.
He was a picker.
Yeah.
So he wanted to
Sure, he wanted to
challenge
play
you,
too. Yeah.
and you never knew when it was your time
Yeah.
to play a solo. You better be watching him.
Yeah.
And he learned that from Bob Wills.
Sure.
Bob Wills's band never knew, and they always had to be watching him. So Merle was like that too. And sometimes Merle would wait until halfway into the first bar before he'd look at you.
Yeah.
He'd really keep you on your toes.
Yeah. Well, I remember I heard a story from one of the old timers that played with Bob Wills. I've been fortunate enough to sit down with him and ask him questions, and he said, "Man, we'd play 5-hour gigs, and that was 5 hours we would play straight through these dance halls." And he goes, and we'd take breaks every 45 minutes, but only 2 people would leave.
Oh.
So 2 people would leave, and then they'd carry on with the other 2 people.
They'd
They'd
come
come back,
back,
2
2
other
more would
people would leave, and then they'd go to like the bar across the street or something. And if there was one, or they'd go up to the bar and they would drink and just kind of use the restroom, relax
man.
for a few minutes, and then they'd come back on stage. And he just had a revolving door.
But
and
Bob
that's
would
what they
never
did.
leave?
Bob would never leave. No, Bob was a diehard. Man, Joe, thanks for being on our show.
Yeah, man,
I'm
absolutely.
honored. Thank you for asking.
And I think that the coolest next chapter in your life is you're pastoring a church, which is exciting.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere. I met this really cool man, Mr. Reed Schaub, here in town. When I moved to Lampasas, I needed someone. Joe Glazer was my guy in Nashville that would take care of my instrument. He does everybody's over there. So when I came here, I needed someone, and everybody said, "You got to go to Reed Schaub."
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing.
He was like a guitar Jedi.
Man, we'd sit around in his shop,
Yeah.
and we'd talk about Jesus,
Mhm.
and he was the most godly man I'd ever met,
Yeah.
or I'd ever known, I should say, known.
Yeah.
And I'm now pastoring the church that he started And it shocked me more than it shocked anybody else probably, but I never intended on that happening.
Well, thank you for coming on the show.
I got one question for
one
you.
more question.
All right,
Go
so
ahead.
you play now for the King.
Yeah.
Now in Texas, Bob Wills is still the King. So
That's right.
does the King still call Bob Wills the King?
I'm sure he does. He is so humble about, they call him the king of country music.
Mm-hmm.
He is not about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and he deserves that title. If you study his records through the years and then the longevity, nobody's ever had that many number ones.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, he still considers, he don't consider himself as king anything.
Yeah.
But
A humble
it's
man.
nice that everybody else does.
Yeah. That's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we do a book of the week, Joe. I know you're a reader.
I am.
This is one of my favorite books that I picked up on leadership. Read lots of leadership books.
Cool.
You ever heard of this
Okay.
guy, Albert Mohler?
I've heard the name.
Okay,
yes.
so this is my book of the week. This is Albert Mohler, and this is Conviction to Lead by Albert Mohler. And he is, then the guy works like nobody's business. He's the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. But it's great for believers. It's great for business people. It's just an incredible book.
Very
I
cool.
have loved this book and listened to it twice and had to buy the hard copy, but it's fantastic.
I'm assuming you're going to give me the Cliff Note version soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, here,
All right.
here it is. Here it is. We're trying to get Edward to read. I'm still not convinced that he can.
And yet I am teaching school.
He's
it's-
teaching school.
yeah.
So, Joe, thanks again for being on.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate
Yes,
it.
thank you, Joe.
Guys, thanks for joining us this week on the Nobodies. Next week, we've got another great show. It's going to be happening soon. We'll talk to you guys later. Adios.
The Nobodies.
It's a great show.